Meanwhile, French officials vowing to crack down on a resurgence of riots in Paris after so-called yellow vest protesters trashed and torched shops and clashed with police during the 18th straight weekend of demonstrations. President Trump tweeting this morning about the chaos there, writing, quote, "How is the Paris Environmental Accord working out for France? After 18 weeks of rioting by the yellow vest protesters, I guess not so well. In the meantime, the United States has gone to the top of all lists on the environment." Our next guest worked directly with President Trump when the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. Joining us now is Mandy Gunasekera, former EPA Deputy Assistant Administrator. Mandy, appreciate your time this morning. Really something to see what is playing out there with the 18th straight weekend now of these protests. I mean, you're talking Champs-Elysees throwing stones at police. Shops are getting ruined there. You can see windows coming down. I mean, it's a mess in Paris.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandra. This is what could have happened here if we had stayed in the Paris Agreement. And the problem is that their political leadership are advancing. They are undermining their economic interests in the name of environmental progress. But the problem is they aren't even achieving environmental progress. What my message to the French leadership is they should shred the Paris Agreement and they should work with President Trump to figure out how to grow the economy in historic ways while advancing successful environmental progress.
Well, as we know, these protests began and the violence began as protests against the planned fuel tax increases. And Emmanuel Macron has responded with this statement, Mandy. Many things have been done since November, but today shows that on these matters we are not there. I want to make strong decisions as soon as possible so that this does not happen. What has Macron been doing there to channel their anger?
I don't think he's been doing a very good job. What Macron should do is what President Trump does very well, which is listen to the people of his country instead of the aloof politicians and advisors around him. You have to place the wisdom of your people first, and what they want more than anything else is economic progress. So Macron has gone around and he's tried to have these listening sessions, but they haven't worked out very well. In the meantime, President Trump, who came to leadership promising to listen to and placing the interests of the American people first, listening to American workers, has grown the economy in historic ways, averaging 3% GDP growth, something unseen in the last administration, while significantly propping up the economic prosperity of American manufacturers, creating millions of jobs, and advancing environmental goals. We lead the world in greenhouse gas emission reductions. From 2005 to 2017, the United States reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 14%, while the rest of the world grew their emissions 20%. So again, my message is to the French president and other signers of the Paris Agreement, those type of agreements don't really work. What they should do is come back to this country, listen to President Trump, and see how you really effectively balance economic prosperity while advancing environmental progress.
So Macron's team is making the case that while they're increasing the public debate on this, the turnout at these protests, while still violent over the weekend, have been declining. Meanwhile, you bring it back here home, Mandy, and I want to play some of this sound from over the weekend. This is Pete Buttigieg. He's the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, a presidential candidate. And he is trying, he says, to broaden the conversation about the environment back here at home. Here he is on with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday.
What the world's going to look like in 2054 when I get to the current age of the current president. And if we don't act aggressively and immediately on climate, it's not going to be a pretty picture. This timetable isn't being set in Congress. It's being set by reality. It's being set by science. And it's going to hit, those deadlines are going to hit in our climate with or without us. And so we have to act.
So he's making the case, Mandy, that in his words, there's already a very passionate community of interest on this subject as he makes his run for the presidency. But he thinks it's important to broaden the conversation beyond environmentalists. What did you make of what he said over the weekend?
So I think he has a valid point. The problem is that we have already made significant environmental gains here in this country. And before talking about what we should do next, people need to be honest about where we are. Again, we lead the world in greenhouse gas emission reductions. We lead the world in terms of having the cleanest air on record and investing billions of dollars in clean water infrastructure. President Trump is a man about action, not about making promises that sound good but don't actually produce results. So broadening the conversation, again, it's a valid point, but we need to be realistic and appreciative of where we actually are today.
All right, great to get your thoughts on that. Mandy Goodness-Akera, thank you for your time.